The idea of having a scheme like Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan was to give states the flexibility to spend on other activities apart from teachers in schools. So things like teacher training, the administrative architecture, the CRCCs, the BRCCs, the small innovation grants or learning enhancement program that we had spoken about earlier. And that's why looking at SSA financing becomes important. When I first started working at Accountability Initiative, one of my first tasks was a very simple question. How much does a school get in terms of total finances? When I started trying to unpack that question, I realized that there is no easy answer. There are multiple steps involved right from the planning stage down till when the money reaches the last mile. Let's look at some of these steps, and this was learning that I myself received while actually doing this process. The first step is planning. You want to plan how much money you need for a particular activity. This planning exercise usually is often coupled with budgeting as well. So you have under SSA the annual work plan and budget exercise, where theoretically schools or habitations make plans which get aggregated upwards at the block, district, and then finally at the state level. After planning, what comes next? Approval. So I've planned for an activity, but I still need for it to get approved. The approval process could be based on multiple factors. Was my plan actually correct? Did I think through the activities? Did I plan for them accurately? Or it could be something to do with prioritization. I could have planned to buy a new book this year, but my laptop crashes and suddenly my plan changes and I need to buy a laptop. The approval process kind of gives us a chance to revisit our initial assumptions and plans. But at the same time, it's also a constraint of the financial availability. I may need a laptop, but do I have the resources to be able to afford it? That's where the approval process becomes important. The next step is actual release, and this is different from the approval process. The release of funds is often based on the availability of funds, but also on the ability of meeting certain administrative criteria. So often in the education system, or actually in the government system, you'll find things like utilization certificates or bills or receipts as important requirements in order to get money released to you. Think about it. If you're working, often in order to get your salary as well, you need to give the details of the bank accounts, you need to give the details of your PAN number, and all of these are administrative requirements that are required for the money to be released to you. And then finally is utilization, the money that is actually spent. This is different from release. So going through the steps again, you have broadly 4 steps right from the budgeting to the utilization process. First is the planning step. Second is the approval process. Third is the actual release of funds. And finally, how money is utilized. This was money that was coming now through Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan. But the government of Bihar had been running a number of chief minister programs, including one for uniform, for many years. In fact, it made political sense in some ways to have that scheme running as a chief minister scheme, given the chief minister's focus at that time on education. Budgets got the amount of money that the state proposed for uniform thus was 0. However, given that it was a central government priority, in the approval process, the union government insisted that Bihar get allocated a certain amount of money for uniforms. What happened next? Can you guess? The money was not utilized because the money was of course not utilized because there was absolutely no need for money for uniforms since it was already budgeted. What happened next even further was that the low utilization in 1 year had an impact on the amount of money that the state received the next financial year. Since planning process and the approval process does take into account the administrative processes as well as utilization from previous years. This may sound a little complicated, but the easiest way to remember is there are different steps involved from planning down to implementation, and each step in some ways feeds into another. It's important to also remember that each step is a distinct step in itself. So what I mean to And by that what I mean to say is that approval is different from release, which is different from utilization. Stay with these thoughts as we move into the next segment. School grants are a very small portion of money. In 2013-14, in the distribution of the total finances, for instance, it would account for less than 1% of the total elementary education budget. But they are important critical grants. While the quantum of money may be less, they are the only grants that actually the school management committee has discretion over. These grants are usually of three types. So you have the teaching learning material, which is roughly based on 500 rupees per teacher. The teaching learning material is meant for buying teaching learning aids. So you must have come across schools where you have the Varnmalas, or you have posters in the schools, or you have a globe or a chart paper. All of these are funds that are funded through the teaching learning material. The next grant, known often as a school development grant or school facility grant in some states, is for basic chalk, duster, register kind of money. Here too there are clear norms. A primary school, i.e. a 1 to 5 school, receives 5,000 rupees. A upper primary school receives 7,000 rupees. And if it's a 1 to 8 school, it's 5 plus 7, i.e. 12,000 rupees. The third kind of grant, which is part of the school grants, is the maintenance grant, school maintenance grants. This is meant for small minor repairs. So whitewashing a classroom to repairing a small leak in a toilet facility, or repairing a hand pump. The way that these grants are determined are based on the number, in some ways are based on the school size. Schools with less than 3 classrooms or 3 or less than 3 classrooms get around 5,000 rupees under the school maintenance grant. In contrast, schools which have more than 3 classrooms get about 10,000 rupees.